Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Best Practice in Conversation. Today I am delighted to be speaking to a lady I have a huge respect and regard for. I've known her for a couple of years now when she first started working in a really busy practice up in Meath. I'm going to introduce her to you now, and I'm also going to let Anne tell you a little bit about herself and where she works and what her position is. So my guest today is Ann Mulligan. So delighted to have you here, Anne, and welcome.
Good morning, Assumpta. Thank you very much for inviting me to your interview today. And thank you for that lovely introduction you just gave me. I absolutely know you for the last number of years, and you've been a wonderful help to me and our staff here in various best practice models you've given us. So I'm working here as practice manager in the Bedford Medical Centre in Navan, County Meath. Navan, as you can imagine, is very urban area. We have a very dense population. We probably have, I would say there's 50 to 60,000 people resident in Navan at the moment. And of that, Bedford Medical Centre have 30,000 people on their books. Now, that's not to say 30,000 people visit us frequently, but we have 7 GMS lists at the moment. And on top of that, a whole cohort of private patients. So in March 21, we fluctuated our numbers throughout the years, but in March 21 now we have 10 doctors. We have the equivalent of 3 full-time nurses, but 7 people, and we have 10 background staff. So it's a very big operation here, but we're growing and developing all the time.
So, you know, it's amazing, Anne, because often we hear about practices in Dublin, and Dublin being our capital city and everything, and they might have panels of 10,000. We think that's quite a lot. But what we're looking at here is Navan, a town in Meath, if you like, and nobody would ever really visualize. So even though you say it's an urban location, whatever, you still wouldn't think that there would be that big a number of patients.
It's huge. Navan is huge, and Navan is very near Dublin. And what has happened during the Celtic Tiger and beyond is a lot of people who lived in Dublin actually moved out to the commuter towns of Navan, Trim. Yes, so quite a lot of people moved into our area, and quite a lot of people transferred their doctoring into our area. So we're only one practice in Navan, but we've another very large practice in the town also, which is over the river from us, very similar numbers as well. And then after that, there's at least 6 or 7 other smaller practices within that too, to manage the huge numbers of people who live here.
It's amazing. And actually, I've seen a visual of your practice, Bedford Medical Centre, and really it looks like a small hospital as opposed to...
It actually is on some days. We feel like that, and it's a very busy spot, but it's a beautiful building, a very enjoyable place to work. And when you mention small hospital, we actually do a 1-day-a-week minor surgery here. So we have 2 doctors who are heavily involved in that, and they take referrals from all over the Northeast and Dublin for minor surgery. So they do chirotherapy, they do removal of sutures, warts, various things there, all referred in from the hospital groups.
That's incredible. So like you really have some operation going there. And Anne and I were originally going to have a chat today, and we were going to talk about, you know, what's happened between March 20 and March 2021. It's hard to believe we're now actually a year on from when everything was turned upside down. But what we're going to talk about, you know, how general practice has had to respond and react to that. But what we're going to sort of cover first, and perhaps we'll have another conversation to cover the other topic, but I think what's even more relevant now is vaccinations, the rollout of vaccinations, how it's affected your practice, because you mentioned to me, Anne, that you've got really quite high numbers. So even if we were to break it into the various age cohorts, and of course, initially we were dealing with over 85s, working our way down, I suppose, with the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna vaccine, right down to the over 70. So tell me about those numbers, and tell me about the kind of operation was involved in your practice to manage that.
Well, like everybody, we knew the vaccination program would come at us at some stage, and we started speaking about this in December. And we said, this thing is going to head our direction. But there was very little information about it back then. But we did really start putting the groundwork in probably in January, because we knew it would be huge. For Bedford Medical Centre, the over 70 cohort is 2,500 people. So that alone is a huge number of people who need to be vaccinated twice with a Pfizer vaccine. It became very apparent to us earlier on that it was the Pfizer vaccine that we were getting. Now, that is good and bad. We were very disappointed initially when we heard that, but now we're used to it. But the Pfizer vaccine comes on a fortnightly delivery schedule. Our delivery schedule is on a Thursday. It could arrive here on a Thursday morning. It could arrive on a Thursday night. Who knows? But you cannot count Thursday into your clinic planning. So you have 120 hours to use that vaccine up, which realistically gives you until Monday evening, or it's useless. And obviously, none of us want to throw out one single vaccine. And that's our priority in Bedford, that we will use every single vaccine. So to plan...
Just literally, yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely. So we start our clinics on a Friday and we run them right through the weekends to get through the different cohorts. So at the moment, I'll just refer to my numbers here. We had 250 which were over the age of 85, and they're done and dusted for their first vaccine. Their second lot of vaccine is actually due next weekend, which is the 19th of March. So there's a 4-week interval between each of those. Our second lot of vaccines we completed was on the 4th of March, and they were the cohort of the over 80s, 80 to 84-year-olds, and we did 336 of those.
Okay.
Our next biggest one now coming along is the 18th of March, and we have a number of 790 there, which is the repeat of the over 85s and the next group of 75 to 79. So it goes along like that, right up to Easter weekend, where we'll see our biggest numbers, which is 1,058 people coming through, which is repeats and new people again. And we will finish our programme on the bank holiday weekend, the 2nd of May, where we hope to have all our over 70s done. However, within all of that, Assumpta, is now, as we are all aware on the news, that it's not the HSE's fault, it's not the Minister for Health's fault. There is not enough supply coming towards us. And we're all actually going to be left short roughly 15%. Even that number is unknown. However, for somewhere like Bedford Medical Centre, 15% of any of those big numbers is a very big number of people contacted short notice. Yeah. So unfortunately for us, we have to now book our patients in with 15% less, because what we've learned in the last 2 clinics, it is easier to make a phone call at short notice and invite one of our patients to come down and get your vaccine, then ring you and say, I'm very sorry, but the Pfizer vaccine did not come and I have to cancel you. We have had to make some of those very difficult calls. Lucky for us, not a huge amount in our case. I would say maybe 40 since the programme began. But those 40 phone calls our staff found very difficult. They're very vulnerable people. They were very disappointed. Yeah. So we're learning as we go along.
And that's such a great learning, you know, because I've heard it in so many practices, and it's such wonderful planning on your part. But it's a learning thing as well, you know, as you go along.
Yeah, we improve as we move. But the only thing I would say is then, for example, next Thursday, I'm due a delivery of 790 vaccines. Mm-hmm. I've already shaved off. Yes, I've already shaved off 15% of that, which is well over the 100 people. Okay. But if those vaccines do arrive, which they could, it is very difficult for us to invite over 100 people on a day's notice, and sometimes not even a day. So that's the other side of it. So it's trying to manage that whole thing, which is one of the things we're still grappling with, but it is what it is. There is nobody to blame here. And, you know, the HSE are getting bad press, but it's not the HSE's fault if the vaccine is not produced, and it's produced in very difficult circumstances.
Of course, yeah. I think there's always there is an appreciation of that. But I think from my experience, and I was actually on News Talk last week, and we were talking about this very thing. We were talking about the challenges for GPs around the rollout of the vaccine, and where the greatest frustrations lay, I suppose. And one of the things that I think most GPs found very difficult and are continuing to find difficult is the communication piece. So it's not about pointing fingers or saying it's your fault or it's your fault. It's just, it was the frustration of people, patients, as you rightly say, this vulnerable group of patients who see this as a real sign of hope, that they're getting their vaccination. Maybe this means I can see my family again. It means so much to them. And I think they were hearing it on the media, mixed messages, be it from the HSE, be it from the various ministers, that the vaccine was going to be rolled out to all over 85s or all over 80s by the end of the week. So they were hearing this in the media, but what was happening for them was very, very different. And I think it wasn't about blaming anybody. It was about being upfront and tell us how it is, so therefore we can manage it. So I think somewhere along the pipeline, communication just gets broken down, and that's where the problems can arise. And I think all credit to Bedford Medical Centre, you've constantly been proactive and been mindful of, well, just in case communication breaks down or just in case something breaks down, this is how we're going to plan it. And that's a really big, a really big piece of it,
Absolutely, I fully agree there. We would always have had those older patients at the forefront of our mind. This was a massive deal to these people. This is the first time the majority of these people have actually left their house to come somewhere to get a vaccine. They haven't gone to a shop, to a mass, to a graveyard, to visit. They have cocooned and followed the rules to the T.
Full year, yeah.
Full year.
Full year, yeah.
And what we witnessed here on the day they arrived was a party atmosphere, an absolute a joy to meet these people. And we were so conscious of the risk they took to physically come out. But there were tears in their eyes. There was people, I met people, some of them were aged 102, which was incredible. And we were honored to be able to provide them with a vaccine. And for their next one, which they've been promised in 4 weeks' time, which is for us next week, by hook or by crook, we will be getting the vaccine here to make sure that happens. Because whatever about 15% and shortages and various things, we cannot let that over 85 group be let down, because their double vaccine is, they feel 2 weeks after that, they feel more at ease. So lack of communication has been a problem with a lot of practices, including our own. However, we had the plan B in place, I would say. So it hasn't affected us as much, but I have seen a lack of communication. I would have done it better myself, but it is a huge operation for the HSE. And I see the operation we have here on our ground and how difficult it is to manage that. It's colossal for them as well. And that's no excuse. I don't work for the HSE, but I can see the difficulties involved. I can see the mixed messages, but it is very difficult when there's so many moving parts involved and the colossal numbers.
Yes, and that's a very, very good point, because I mean, there obviously is a case that the government have been let down, or the HSE have been let down.
Absolutely.
And I think people do appreciate that too. But I think there was kind of an overlap there of what we described, and you just alluded to there as well, that how much it means, particularly to this age cohort. So it was very emotive. So very. Yeah, so I think that, the practices were also very aware of how much this meant, not just to them, but also to their patients. And their patients are hearing something. They trust their GP. Their GP is the one person that they trust in all of this. Their GP is telling them one thing, but they're hearing it on the media. And surely if it's on the media, it must be true.
Yes.
And then the GP, I suppose, are trying to protect this group as well, because they've been coming to their practice for years and years and years. So those are a different set of moving parts to the logistics and the supply chain that's happening on the other side. So I think at one point, perhaps towards the middle of last week, there was like a bang, where everything kind of came together, where there was this unbelievable bubble of frustration had burst, but I think we're now starting to come out the other side of that, which is really, really good.
Yes, last week was a particularly difficult week for a lot of practices. Even in our own case last week, we did ourselves get notification on the day we were due to receive 336 vaccines. We got notification on the day that it was not coming, despite the fact the day before we got confirmation it would be here. So all of those, yes. So that morning I received the call and I put my hand in my head and said, what am I going to do? We were left with a day's notice of having to contact the 80 to 84 age group, which are still an older age group, and disappoint them. We knew we wouldn't have time to get to them all. We knew they wouldn't all receive their text. And we had visions of them all arriving here on Friday and no vaccine. And it was unthinkable. We did all sorts. We rang every TD we knew. We spoke to everybody we possibly could in any government position. And as it happens, Assumpta, throughout all of that, the Pfizer vaccine just arrived anyway. Despite all the upset and upheaval of that morning, the HSE had given us notice that it wasn't coming. And at the same time, it was halfway down the road from Dublin to here.
No way.
Incredible stuff. So it was nothing on our part that we did to get the Pfizer vaccine. It was coming anyway, which was incredible. We've no idea. The reason was human error. The distribution channel is cold chain. Yeah. And cold chain and the HSE, who operate together obviously on this, whatever kind of mixed messages happened, but one did not seem to know what the other was doing.
Yeah.
So naturally we got on with the job and did our thing, but it has left us with an uneasy feeling about next week and the following 2 weeks, and there's a bit of trepidation there. So at the moment we've been assured our numbers for next week, less 15%. Okay. But will we? So time will tell, but I've got to assume it'll be okay. And we have our plan B. We have reduced our numbers that we've contacted to allow for that. We are hoping, Assumpta, because we're one of the bigger practices, that letting us down at the last minute is just not an option, because we cannot contact all those patients very quickly. But letting any practice down at the last minute should not be an option, because we're emotionally involved with our patients. Yeah. Plus, we don't have the resources for last minute contact. No. And that doesn't seem to be understood on the other side.
Yeah.
So I believe we will be given the correct notice now. They are putting a protocol in place. We all have account managers, and we have a direct. Excellent. Yes. Okay. Now there was a little bit of trouble with that also, in that account managers have changed, and one day I had, well, who knows, or promoted or whatever. But one day I had 3, then I had none, and now I have a new one. So.
Okay.
We have 5 numbers, that's all I know.
Yeah, very good. You have 5 numbers now?
We have 5 numbers and they're held on our mobiles.
That is just so funny. You know what? It's incredible, and it's really good to get an insight into what's involved as well. And I'm going to sort of finish on this, because I think, even just to demonstrate the resourcefulness of general practice, there's way more I can talk about. There's so much to talk about over what's happened over the last year. But even if we're just to focus on these vaccines alone, I can think about what's happening in the Helix in DCU. And they have set it up there where there's 121 GP practices contributing into what is a mass vaccine clinic in that centre. And at the very beginning of this process, I think because there was a dependence on supply, on one particular day there were 1,000 vaccines, And it's come to mind again because you mentioned that you have over 1,000 people potentially coming through your practice next weekend.
We do, yeah.
And you're a group of 10 GPs and practice nurses and the admin team as well. But in the case of Dublin, at that point, there were 121 GPs on the sidelines, just as you described, there for their patients, because again, they're also very aware that all their patients are in very vulnerable groups. But it took one day for these 1,000. Now, that's not fair to say, because if they'd had more vaccines, then they would have given out more vaccinations. But there are GPs coordinating that operation down there. So I know, and I have complete faith that that will roll out, and particularly when it goes into the bigger cohorts. And of course, when we have the vaccines, and this new Janssen vaccine sounds like, you know, it's going to give us a ray of hope because it's a single dose.
Yes.
And if it does become available, then it'll make everybody's job that little bit easier, but that's it down the road. But I think we have to, my point in all of this is that GPs and practice managers and practice nurses have done an incredible job in holding all of this together with one focus in mind, and that has been the patient, you know, who is holding out for this ray of hope, just like we all are, that we're come out to the side of this, and we absolutely will. You know, it's been very, very difficult, lockdown 3, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And do you feel that now, Anne?
There is, absolutely, we do. The vaccine clinics, they'll come and go, and hopefully we'll get to the end of them unscathed by middle of May at this stage, really. There is light at the end of the tunnel. You know, post-COVID, we will see massive changes in general practice. We've had to do things very differently for the last year because it was foisted upon us. Things that would have taken 5-10 years to do maybe beforehand were done with the blink of an eye, through no choice. Just get on with it.
And so, you know what, Anne? I'm not going to talk about that today because I really
we're going to go into that another day.
I want to really have another conversation with you on
no
this.
Problem. No problem. So on the vaccines that you mentioned there in relation to numbers, absolutely, they did 1,000 a day or whatever in DCU, and hats off to them, a massive operation. But we actually do have those numbers coming in here over an entire weekend. And next weekend I have 790 coming in, and 2 weeks after that I have 1,058. We have 8 vaccinators, 2 people doing paperwork, a floating vaccinator, and a myriad of admin staff who are going to give up their entire weekend to come in.
I might add.
Absolutely. All hands on deck here. Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday lunch will be provided during the day, and hopefully an Easter egg. But every one of our staff, hats off to all of them. They have done this with a heart and a half. They want to do the job. They want to get the job done. They want to do the best for the patients here, but they also want us to move on and get back to the day job so we can get rid of this vaccine clinic and move to the next part of our patients, which is the vulnerable and sick people who are still out there all of the time. So we're very happy to throw all we have at it. But our GPs, our partners are all coming in on all of these days alongside every day they work in normal clinics as well. So they're exhausted. What they find on the clinic day, it's a pleasure. It's actually a very uplifting day to be involved in. Even myself here on the last few weekends, standing in a car park and greeting people at the door, and they're so happy to be here. It's so emotional. And our nurses, and they helping them in and helping them out. And it's just a wonderful sight to see.
Sense of occasion.
Occasion is absolutely the word for it. Wonderful. And we all feel like that here, Bedford. But I'm very lucky as something. I'm only one cog in a wheel here. It's the nurses, the doctors, the admin, the booking team, even down to our maintenance men who have done sterling work for us here, putting up marquees, signage in the car parks, directing traffic in, everybody involved, our cleaners. It's incredible the whole team effort that has happened to make this happen. So it's all the team together, not one person, not a number of doctors, it's an entire team.
I know, and sometimes you need a driver on the team, so due credit for that. And it's actually been lovely talking to you today. I really can't wait to talk to you again.
No problem, Assumpta.
As I said, we were going to talk about something else,
yes.
And we absolutely will have another conversation another day when things calm down a little bit for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you've got a busy day ahead. We did this at quite short notice as well, so I really appreciate you doing it.
No problem.
And we'll definitely talk again soon. Thank you so much, Anne, for joining me today.
Thank you, Assumpta. It was a pleasure. I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.
Thanks a million.